I'm the youngest of 8 children. My dad was a grain buyer, but he died quite young. When I look back on it, I thought it was fantastic. We didn't have anything. I can't imagine being much poorer, but I never remember a bad day. I got finished high school in North Battleford. My chum and I hitchhiked, if you can imagine doing that in 1940 or 1939, out from the prairies. We weren't very bright because there weren't many cars on the road. But we hitchhiked out to Vancouver. And what happened in my case, the American fellows were coming across the line. The States weren't in the war yet, and they were coming up and joining the RCF. And I met some of these fellows in Vancouver and got to know them for a day or two, and this started me thinking, and I got to wondering about, well, good Lord, if these fellows will come up from the States, what am I doing? And so I ended up on the train with them, going to Edmonton, to the Manning Depot to Edmonton, writing a Dear Mum letter. This will come as quite a shock to you, but I am now in the service. Well, the interesting thing in my case is I didn't join to be a pilot. I joined to be an aero engine mechanic because I wanted a job after the war. Well, people that know me find that rather odd because normally I don't think that far ahead. But then I ran into an officer that was at Manning Depot, and he got talking to me one day, and he said, "Oh my God, why aren't you in aircrew training? You got the qualifications in that," and all those things. I started thinking about it, and then I went in one day and said I'd like to change over to the air crew, and I qualified for pilot and graduated as a pilot and served as a pilot. But the important thing is, that was about a year and a half of training before I ever got anywhere near operations. But I did all my operations on B-24 Liberators. On the convoy escort business, we didn't have any aircraft that could provide air cover other than off a carrier to close the gap in the North Atlantic. So the Liberator was introduced, I think, into the service and through design, to be a daylight bomber. Well, then, of course, they found out it was a much more versatile airplane, so the Lib could go up and perform at 35,000 feet. Primarily, initially, we were what we called VLR, which is very long range, and we were doing convoy escort and filling the black hole. From our squadron, there were 4 crews of 10 men in each crew, which is 40 people, we were assigned the job of going in over France and dropping what we call 4-inch training flares. They were a parachute flare that fell down on a parachute, so they stayed in the air a long time, very, very bright light. And what we were doing was a decoy, trying to indicate to the enemy that we were planning on going in at that point, that's where the invasion would take place. Unfortunately, the other 3 crews went missing that night, and we were the only crew to get back home. We started to wonder why, what happened to these crews. We could go out night after night, and that type of thing wasn't happening. We weren't used to that. In the military flying business, thou shalt not go below 1,000 feet. I had a rule of thumb. When I got into trouble, I went down, not up. And that night, for example, once we had ignited our flares and set that in motion, I just stuck my nose down, went down the deck and went home and got out of there. For the simple reason I knew there would be fighters up. And that's probably what got the other 3 crews. I used to do the same thing on the U-boat attacks. I went in on the deck. Maybe 20 feet at night. Well, they briefed us to go and attack at 300 feet. We started losing crews, and so that told me very quickly that the enemy knows we're going to attack at 300 feet. So what I tried to do, particularly at night when we had the tracer, I tried to keep the tracer going over the coop top. We trained, extensively before D-Day. Just about every night we were in the air. You'd go out and maybe have a particularly difficult trip, have a few beer, go to bed, couldn't sleep, ears ring pretty. Then you'd get up and walk around a bit and do some things, and then have a couple of more beers. The second time in bed, you sleep. This was the life, and so we didn't talk about it. Our idea of a night out was to go out with the crew. And so it's a social night out, eh? You'd go to a pub, a local pub or something to have a beer. Always ended up with some member of the crew talking about something he was doing. Well, then when D-Day came, our particular assignment was what we call court patrols. And we patrolled from Land's End in Britain to the Cherbourg Peninsula, to Brest and the Isle of Ushant, just off France. And we had an airplane in the air every 15 minutes apart. And if you picked up, say, a contact with a U-boat and attacked it, you were allowed to go down, take one look to see about results, then you jump back up into your slot and preserve the racetrack, as we used to call it, eh? We didn't get out on D-Day, we got out the night after D-Day. In doing that, we detected 2 U-boats and sunk them in 22 minutes. Now that was a tremendous thing, and much more important than it would normally be, because we had just lost 30 people. So it was sort of accepted as a retaliation type thing, and hey, there's no secrets out there. It's still just good basic anti-submarine tactics. I was coming back home. I didn't know what I was going to be doing, but I was slated to go to Abbotsford and instruct on Liberators for the Pacific. And that just sort of happened like that. I often wondered why that was, and I think it was because we were so close that you sort of don't want to spoil it. I went and worked for General Motors. Then the damn Air Force started writing me to go back into the service. They were looking for 4-engine pilots for the Pacific. But anyway, I decided to come back in, and I then stayed in and did a total of about just over 31 years. Oh, I suppose without doubt I grew up in a hurry. There was a lot of honor amongst us. By that I mean some of the basic down-to-earth living qualities are still there. They've lasted us, in my case now, for 81 years, and I'm sure they'll see me out.